Good evening, everyone. I'll be talking about lower extremity arterial occlusive disease, epidemiology, and natural history. So, I'm Dr. Pawan from Jeevas in Bangalore. I'm a second year resident. So, this will be the scheme of presentation. Initially, I'll talk about epidemiology, risk factors, anatomical distribution of disease, and clinical correlations. And also later on, clinical syndromes, staging, and natural history of each of the clinical syndromes. So, coming to the epidemiology, incidence and prevalence. Peripheral arterial disease is defined as chronic atherosclerotic occlusive disease of the lower extremities. In the year 2010, there were estimates which suggested that over 200 million people worldwide were living with peripheral arterial disease. This represented an increase of around 24% since 2000. That is largely believed to be largely attributable to an aging population and the growing prevalence of risk factors such as diabetes, smoking, hypertension, and dyslipidemia. So these figures are again thought to almost certainly underestimate the true burden of the disease, as they are largely based on community-based studies that define peripheral arterial disease on the basis of reduced ABI. So coming to the prevalence of arterial disease, age prevalence, here you can see that they have been divided into high income countries and low and middle income countries. So the difference is seen here between 2000 and 2010. In the high income country group, there's almost a 13% increase, whereas in the low and middle income group, almost a 30% increase from 2000 to 2010. So coming to the gender prevalence, again in high income countries, men and women appear to be affected equally, and the prevalence is less than 5% in patients who are younger than 50 to approximately 20% in individuals older than 80 years. Whereas in the low and middle income countries, age specific rates appear higher in women compared with men. So there are studies which have demonstrated that women have lower ABI than men. So the reasons for this observation are unclear, not readily explained by the differences in established risk factor for atherosclerosis. So again, this is a graph of prevalence in male and female patients in high income and low income countries. So again, as told before, men have been reported to have a higher prevalence in high income countries and women in the low and middle income countries. So there was a meta-analysis from the United States which showed that the prevalence of peripheral arterial disease in men ranged from 6.5 in patients aged 60 to 69 years to 11.6 in patients aged 70 to 79 years and almost up to 30% in patients aged more than 80 years. So there were similar age-related increases in PAD prevalence in women, that is 5.3, 11.5 and 24.7 in these age categories. So the same epidemiology of peripheral arterial disease is likely to be similar in other developed countries such as the United Kingdom and regions such as the European Union. So intermittent claudication is estimated to affect up to 6% of individuals older than 65 years in the Western countries. It is recognized that many peripheral arterial disease patients describe atypical leg pain syndromes, that is non-calf pain or calf pain with non-classic descriptors that are not accurately captured. So estimates of CLI incidence and prevalence have ranged from 0.02 to 0.35 and 1.2 to 2.35 across studies of adult populations who cannot really be compared. So data on the epidemiology of PAD and in particular of CLTI in other parts of the world are even more limited. So in one study where they took into account Japanese community with people older than 40 years, the prevalence of ABI of less than 0.9 was very low, that is 1.4%. Another Chinese study, population-based cohort of 4,055 patients older than 60 years, The prevalence of PAD defined by ABA less than 0.9 was 2.9 in men and 2.8% in women. So another study which was done in Central Africa showed the overall prevalence of peripheral arterial disease there to be 14.8%. So there are far more international data on the epidemiology of intermittent claudication than of CLTI. The annual incidence of IC in a 60-year-old men has been shown to range from 0.2% in Iceland to almost around 1% in Israel. So these are data coming in from different studies and different countries. So again, there was a study conducted in the US on the insured US population where they showed the prevalence of PAD to be around 2.4% in a cohort of adults older than 40 years. So coming to the risk factors, peripheral arterial disease shares many risk factors with other clinical atherosclerotic conditions such as coronary artery disease and cerebrovascular disease. However, differences in the profile of peripheral arterial disease, CAD and CVD patients have been characterized, and the strength of association of specific risk factors varies across the clinical syndromes as well as across anatomical patterns. So what are the risk factors? Initially coming to demographics. So age is the strongest risk factor for PAD. So this disease is rare in individuals younger than 40 years, rises in prevalence in the 6th to 8th decades, and may affect 25% or more of the individuals 80 years and older. So smoking is a strong and independent predictor of PAD across populations. Several studies have demonstrated odd ratios in the range of 2 to 4-fold. So second-hand smoke also appears to carry increased risk, although data in this regard is limited. So coming to diabetes mellitus, it has been strongly associated with PAD prevalence and severity. Odds ratio here are similar to those of smoking in the range of 2 to 4-fold. So older individuals with more than a decade of diabetes are at the highest risk. So the combination of diabetes and smoking is the most insidious. It portends a high risk for PAD severity, amputation, and mortality. So multiple studies have demonstrated that long-term outcomes of PAD are adversely influenced by the presence of diabetes, including reduced survival and a 5-fold increased rate of limb loss. And hypertension, the association is consistent across many studies, although less strong than seen with smoking and diabetes. Because age is a common risk factor for both, the independent association between hypertension and PAD appears weaker on multivariable analysis. And dyslipidemia is also a major risk factor. Here we see that elevated total cholesterol and reduced HDL levels have been associated with PAD, and the ratio of total cholesterol and HDL was a strong predictor in both San Diego population study and physicians health study. And there are some studies which have demonstrated a link between elevated triglyceride levels and peripheral arterial disease. So coming to obesity, the distribution of body fat may be of greater relevance here. Some studies have suggested the existence of an obesity paradox, wherein you have lower rates of peripheral arterial disease being observed in patients with a higher BMI. So here central obesity more consistently linked to diabetes and to metabolic syndrome appears of greater relevance to peripheral arterial disease than overall obesity. And coming to inflammation, here we see plasma levels of CRP and fibrinogen. They have shown consistent associations with peripheral arterial disease. And of all the clinical atherosclerosis syndromes, CLI patients appear to have the most pronounced pro-inflammatory phenotype. So circulating cytokines such as IL-6 and adhesion molecules are also elevated in peripheral arterial disease patients. So predictive value and clinical utility of these markers as well as other markers such as D-dimer, beta-2 macroglobulin, asymmetric dimethyl arginine cystatin C, they are not clearly defined as yet. So homocysteine, there are studies which have demonstrated that there is a statistical relationship between elevated plasma levels of homocysteine and arterial disease. However, the strength of the association is moderate when controlled for other risk factors. So the association is not clearly well defined. And coming to socioeconomic status, so peripheral arterial disease has been associated with lower socioeconomic status, including lower levels of income and education. So there was a recent analysis from atherosclerosis risk in community study, which demonstrated that household income, educational attainment, and area level deprivation index were strong predictors of hospitalization in advanced disease. So again, these are the odds ratio when you look at all the risk factors. Here we can see that odds ratio for CVD and current smoking are definitely more than 2.5 to 3 in high income countries, whereas you can see the male sex more in the high income and the female population affected more in the uh, low and middle income countries. Also, BMI here has a negative correlation. So the obesity paradox seems to be true. So coming to the anatomical distribution of disease and clinical correlations. So lower extremity arterial disease has been anatomically described by the levels or segments affected, and they include 3 levels, that is aortoiliac, femoropopliteal and tibiopedal disease. So again, smokers have a higher frequency of aortoiliac and femoropopliteal, whereas diabetes is more typically associated with lower down, that is crural, tibioperoneal and femoropopliteal involvement. So there is a clear relationship between disease pattern and clinical presentation. Patients with intermittent claudication typically present with aortoiliac or femoropopliteal disease, often with a single segment involved. In contrast, severe limb ischemia or critical limb ischemia generally results from involvement of at least 2 arterial segments or severe tibiopedal disease. So this is again a diagram showing here. So depending on the age, again it's more towards crural disease in older age groups, and even diabetes mellitus, we see that the distribution is more towards the tibioperoneal segment. Hypertension, there is an equal distribution of the disease, whereas the dyslipidemia and smoking affects more of aortoiliac and femoropopliteal segments. So coming to the clinical syndromes which we see in peripheral arterial disease. So individuals afflicted may be grouped by clinical presentation, with the largest proportion being asymptomatic. Atypical leg symptoms, classical intermittent claudication and CLI sign the symptoms are frequent indications for referral to a vascular surgeon. So as we all know, these are the different stages of chronic limb ischemia as graded by both Fontaine and Rutherford. So we have 4 in Fontaine and 6 in Rutherford. So there is a clinical description and also an objective criteria, where we see in category 5 and 6, the resting ankle pressure is less than 50, and ankle and metatarsal PVR waveforms are flat, and also a toe pressure of less than 40 and TCPO2 less than 30 mm. So coming to asymptomatic disease, it carries significant cardiovascular risk and mortality and is associated with functional decline. So Kricke demonstrated that individuals with symptomatic PAD had an overall 2.7-fold greater risk of mortality and up to almost a 6-fold greater increase risk of CAD-related death. So mortality and CV risk are strongly associated with both reduced ABI and an elevated ABI, that is more than 1.4, consistent with vessel calcification. So again, if you look at the odds ratio here, estimated odds ratio for all-cause mortality for individuals with symptomatic or asymptomatic peripheral arterial disease. So in asymptomatic disease, the odds ratio is up to 1.53, and symptomatic it is around 1.98. in several studies done so far. So the risk of progression from asymptomatic PAD to symptomatic is not well defined. However, a meta-analysis estimated that 7% of asymptomatic patients deteriorate to intermittent claudication over a 5-year period. So coming to intermittent claudication, it is a clinical syndrome characterized by reproducible leg pain brought on by exercise and relieved by rest. So symptom location reflects the segment of or the level of artery that is involved. So aortoiliac disease frequently presents with proximal muscle symptoms of buttock, hip or thigh with or without associated calf pain, whereas femoropopliteal disease will manifest as calf pain with exercise. So in a systematic review, it was found that 21% of intermittent claudication patients experience deterioration of limb status over a 5-year period. And it was noted that the deterioration is greatest within the first year after diagnosis. So risk of major amputation has been estimated at less than 1% per year across a number of studies. So this is one of the studies, and this was adapted from the American College of Cardiology. So here we find 5-year outcomes both in limb morbidity and cardiovascular morbidity. So limb morbidity, you find that in 5-year outcomes up to 70 to 80% have stable claudication, 20 to 30% have worsening claudication, and 1 to 3% have critical limb ischemia. And 20% of these patients have MI or stroke, and 10 to 15% of these patients have mortality. Coming to limb-threatening ischemia, there are more recent efforts which have suggested the alternative terminology of chronic limb-threatening ischemia to severe limb ischemia or critical limb ischemia. This is broadly inclusive of the full spectrum of ischemia and neuropathy that are seen in peripheral arterial disease patients. So high quality data on the epidemiology of CLTI are lacking, especially from low and middle income countries, with many estimates being extrapolated from incidence and prevalence of intermittent claudication, amputation, and DM. So such estimates can be misleading. There are reasons for this. One reason is intermittent claudication does not progress to CLTI in a predictable manner. And also CLTI represents less than 10% of all peripheral arterial disease patients. And those undergoing amputation for CLTI are at a very high risk of premature death. So they are more likely to be absent from population-based studies. And third, the clinical and hemodynamic data required to reliably diagnose CLTI are difficult to obtain in large populations. So the more recent GVG guidelines proposes that CLTI be defined to include a broader and more heterogeneous group of patients with varying degrees of ischemia that may delay wound healing and increase amputation risk. So a diagnosis of CLTI requires objectively documented atherosclerotic peripheral arterial disease in association with ischemic rest pain or tissue loss. So ischemic rest pain is typically described as pain affecting the forefoot and is often made worse with recumbency while being relieved by dependency. So it should be present for more than 2 weeks and be associated with one of these following factors and hemodynamic parameters. So ABI less than 0.4, absolute highest ankle pressure of less than 50 mm per mercury, absolute toe pressures of less than 30 mm per Hg, and even TCPO2 of less than 30 mm per Hg, and flat or minimally pulsatile PVR waveforms, which is equivalent to Wi-Fi ischemia grade 3. So many of the CLTI patients do not have an antecedent history of classical intermittent claudication, presenting with rest pain or tissue loss as the initial manifestation of their disease. So this may relate to anatomical distribution of the disease, predominantly infrapopliteal involvement, coexistent peripheral neuropathy, reduced mobility from comorbid factors, or an acute inciting event such as trauma or foot infection. So these were some of the risk prediction models that were used in a patient with CLTI. So FinVasc, Prevent3, Basil, and CRAB. The most commonly used model now is the VQI, which takes into account age, tissue loss, diabetes, CHF, creatinine, ambulatory status, urgent operation, and the conduit used. So the endpoint here is the amputation-free survival for 1 year. So coming to critical limb ischemia, it affects a minority of individuals with peripheral arterial disease. It is estimated to be somewhere between 1 to 10%. The prevalence of CLI has been estimated at 1.3 in a study which was done on an insured US adult population, and up to 1.2% of Swedish adults older than 60 years. So there was another meta-analysis done in 2013 in Italy, which showed the estimated prevalence of CLI in the population at around 0.8%. So there was another study which took into account 13 studies and 1,527 patients who did not receive any limb revascularization. So here at 1 year, the estimated mortality was around 22%, and major amputation had occurred in 22% of the patient population. However, these data are limited in generalizability because many patients with CLI undergo eventual revascularization. So coming to Wi-Fi staging, so there was a need for improved staging to define the amputation risk and to appropriately compare treatment outcomes, which led to the development of SVS, lower extremity threatened limb classification system. Here it takes into account the wound, ischemia, and foot infection, similar to a TNM staging for malignancy. So as you all know, the Wi-Fi system and the description of the system here. So again, staging depends on the different parameters. So as we can see here, the rate of 1 year rate of major amputation varies a lot from clinical stage 1 to stage 4. At stage 1, it is around 0.75%, and it can go up to around 25% in stage 4. So again, these are the different studies to validate the Wi-Fi staging here. And here, the median 1 year major limb amputation risk was around 30% for stage 4 at the end of 1 year. So it is currently being evaluated in multi-center trials, including in the US, it's called the BEST CLI trial, and in the UK, BASIL 2. And Wi-Fi is also being incorporated into the US SVS Vascular Quality Initiative, that is VQI registry of lower extremity interventions. So screening for peripheral arterial disease. So given the strong association of peripheral arterial disease and cardiovascular events, some have advocated for ABI screening, which is non-invasive, simple, and inexpensive. So the current Society for Vascular Surgery guidelines recommend against population screening for PAD. However, they suggest that targeted screening may be reasonable among individuals at higher risk, that is age more than 70 years, and in patients with diabetes, if it would help improve the risk stratification or even influence medical therapy. So the 2016 AHA and ACC guidelines also recommend targeted ABI testing in asymptomatic individuals who are at an increased risk for PAD. So this population was defined as patients whose age is older than 65 years or who are aged from 50 to 64 with risk factors for atherosclerosis or family history of PAD, and also age older than 50 with diabetes plus one additional risk factor, or any individual with established atherosclerosis and other vascular bed, be it coronary or cerebral. So coming to surveillance of peripheral arterial disease patients with established disease, patients and their primary providers should be made aware of the presence of the disease and the signs and symptoms of its advancement. And those with diabetes or history of CLTI should have regular foot examinations and be counseled on preventive foot care. So symptomatic patients with objectively determined PAD are typically followed long term to monitor for symptomatic worsening or disease progression. So the current SVS guidelines recommends that all patients with intermittent claudication be followed annually to assess for compliance with medical and lifestyle management, as well as for evidence of progression with clinical examination and ABI testing. So the AHA guideline concurs with the need for long-term clinical follow-up, and also patients with intermittent claudication or CLI who have undergone revascularizations are monitored more closely, including surveillance of the vascular reconstruction. And to conclude, these are the different studies that have been carried out since 1993, and some of them are ongoing. These are the studies of peripheral arterial disease in different populations, wherein almost all of them have taken into account an ABI of less than 0.9. That concludes. And September is the awareness month for peripheral arterial disease. Thank you, sir.